This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Here it is.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will be moderating, and I'll be asking people to ask questions in a designated order that we already have. As a reminder, please keep yourself muted in between questions so that we don't get any audio feedback. Only ask one question at a time, no follow-up, so that everyone can get as many questions as possible. Thank you very much. So to start off,
And
we're
Dave
going to have...
can't duck any questions, right?
That's not true. I'm going to bend like a reed in the wind.
So first off, if we can start off with Trisha, please, from Fangirls Going Rogue.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. The Mandalorian and the Jedi have a long history in the galaxy far, far away, and both are rebuilding in the show's era. Is Grogu a nexus point for those two cultures to perhaps unite under Tar Vizsla's darksaber?
That's a very interesting perspective. You know, he is definitely somebody who has spent time in both worlds. And we know that he started off earlier in the Jedi Temple. We've seen flashbacks to that, that speak to that. And then we know that he's been rescued and spent many years with the Mandalorian, went back with Luke. Now we've been 2 years apart from him there training. What's interesting is that as he chooses to return to his friend, the Mandalorian, because he's developed an attachment, it's interesting how that echoes in a way Luke's path when he was drawn to the attachment to his friends and how that helped shape the future. So I think that you're pointing out an interesting thing that we definitely discuss a great deal of. Where does he sit and who has come before him and what is the relationship of those two civilizations? Because the Mandalorian armor, as Dave has taught me, is developed to counteract all of the natural abilities that the Jedi had and made it a more level playing field. So we have a lot to draw from, both from the Clone Wars, where they both cooperated and fought. And we also have ancient history as we saw in games and in extended universe, where we know what you're referring to, which is that they didn't get along very well in the past. So that's a very interesting, valid perspective.
Deep question.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to have Charlotte and Caitlin from Skywalker's podcast.
Hi, Dave. Hi, John. Such an honor to speak with you today. One thing we see a lot of in Star Wars is the connections between generations, often in the form of master and apprentice or father and son with Din and Grogu. Why do you think this dynamic is so compelling?
I think that, we're all, as we grow up, we're always seeking knowledge. We're always seeking to be understood and to understand the world around us better. I think that, in so many disciplines beyond even a martial art, there is a master and apprentice, in a very real way. I felt fortunate that George was my mentor for many years to even learn how to make Star Wars. So those relationships in your journey through life, you find people that know more than you and that help educate you, that help you on your way. And so I think it's just something that we all understand consciously, unconsciously. I think when you add a family dynamic to it, like Mando and Grogu, it's even more powerful because we have that relationship in our life from the beginning. And in Star Wars Rebels, we explored how that relationship can be different. It can be an adoptive family. It's not even necessarily the family that you're born into. And I think
in Star Wars, that seems to be more powerful.
To be something that happens quite a bit.
And that your bloodline isn't necessarily the most
defining thing.
Right.
Yeah, Mando and Grogu are adopted too. Mando was an outcast and Grogu was adrift. So I think people feel these ways, and that's why they want to see characters overcome them. We want to see, we are dying for Mando to shut the ship off and go get Grogu in season 1. That's the right thing to do. And we want to believe that we're going to do the right thing. We want to be Luke and be brave enough to not rely on the targeted computer and turn it off. We want to believe in ourselves. But it takes everything that these stories tell us leading up to that moment to get these characters over that hump and do these things. But I think that's why we respond to it. We see the characters do things that maybe we're not quite capable of yet, but they give us confidence to take the next step, hopefully, in life.
Thank you. Next up, we are going to have Richard and Sarah from Skywalking Through Neverland.
Hi, gentlemen. This is Sarah and Richard from Skywalking Through Neverland. It's great to see you guys again.
Yeah, bright suns. Now,
Bright suns.
we know you can't give too many deep cuts on this upcoming season, but can you give us some deep cut Easter eggs to look out for?
Well, that's part of the fun of the Easter egg, is that it's something that you find, right? Isn't that it? I will say that we really try to do everything we can to find aspects of Star Wars that maybe is unexpected for us to include. And I think that we had a lot of fun at first with drawing from the Star Wars holiday special with the Amban, the pulse rifle, and also the Camtono being the Wilrose Hood's ice cream maker. I think that the part of that I'm enjoying the most about this process is that no matter what part of fandom you're from, and no matter what you grew up with and what era you connect with, we want to make sure that everybody we have something for everybody here, and that everybody's welcome to be part of it. Even if you're a new fan, even if you're starting off, hopefully, I think that was one of the nice things about the first season, is that these were characters. Now, if you knew about Star Wars, hopefully there was a lot of rewards for all the time spent reading the books or watching the movies or even the TV shows. But if you were new, you were just as welcome, arguably more welcome, because it's like we have to invite the next generation in, and it's always been an open door for young people. And as a kid, I still remember I felt 10, 11 years old. It felt like it was for me, but it didn't feel like it was pandering. And so we want to try to make everybody feel that there's something for them here. And we talk about that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And we have directors from different segments of the entertainment world, bringing different perspectives. That's animation, independent film, so all of it is meant to really make it feel like how it feels when you're at celebration. You have people from all around the world dressed as different characters, different ages, and everybody's happy and taking pictures together. That's what it feels like for us, and that's what we want to try to capture with the show.
Well, thank you very much, and ignite the spark.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kerwin and Keith from Father Son Galaxy.
Hello there.
Hello.
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 Insane to be before the mighty Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau.
Oh, wow, mate.
Wow.
Be kind.
Oh, I gotta put my heart back in my chest. All right. So The Mandalorian has been praised for its ability to tell a story that resonates with audiences on a very deep level. So if art is a form of a mirror, what do you think Din Djarin's character reflects back to us about ourselves and our society?
Well, for me, I can only speak personally. What appealed to me about Mando from the beginning was that he's somebody that's very protected. He's inside armor. And while that armor gives him a benefit, it also has him, I thought, incredibly closed off. And I think that we feel that way. We put on our armor a lot these days, and everything feels very combative, and the world outside maybe doesn't feel as friendly to us. And so we're armored up. But the significant thing for Mando is that, when he meets Grogu, that all changes. It's small things at first, and it becomes simple kindnesses. I'm protecting him. Why? Because he's worth money. But then he ends up protecting him because it is the right thing to do. And so I think that, Mando as a character is reflecting this armor, but we have to ask ourselves, what does that armor really mean? What is its value? It is his face, but when he finally takes the helmet off and Grogu sees his face and he touches his face at the end of season 2, it becomes something more. It becomes, I'm showing you my true face, my true self. I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable. So I think that those are the things that really appeal to me about Mando, and it's allowing us maybe to take our own helmet off and be more visible to people. I mean, that's the way I read it. I don't know if you feel that way, but there you go. Does that help?
Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to have Brian from Full of Sith.
Hello, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. The question I've got, and I'm sure, Dave, you've fielded a lot of these, is just, a lot of the cinematic influences. In Book of Boba Fett, there's definitely a lot of Lone Wolf and Cub in the choice Luke gives Grogu. But John, you mentioned in an interview Paper Moon, and I went back and rewatched it again, and that movie's so good, and it hit me right between the eyes. And I'm wondering if you could, if you both could kind of speak to the conversations about your influences in this coming season, and stuff that might be surprising, like Paper Moon.
I think some of it just is, the writing process and filmmaking process, but especially the writing process is not really a conscious one for me. We do a lot of discussion about, and very much a conscious set of decisions about the broad strokes of where we're going to go and what we're going to do. But when you're actually letting the characters talk to each other and the story is unfolding, if you're doing a good job writing, it doesn't always feel, you don't always know what's going to happen next. And you're really a product, your subconscious is really a product of all your influences. And Paper Moon was a very strong influence on me. And a lot of movies of that time period. I'm now in my, I'm 56, I think. Yeah, I think I'm 56. At my age, you start to lose track of the years, but late 50s.
The number.
And I grew up with the Bad News Bears, and I grew up with, Paper Moon, and films like that had, there were such interesting relationships of misfits who feel like they're don't belong anywhere, but these family relationships emerge. And then the family relationships are often stronger than the bloodline relationships. And that's certainly a hallmark of Star Wars. Families develop around these characters that are spending time together, and bonds are forming. And people are changing who they are based on the experiences that they have together. Look at the arc of Han Solo in the first film. Somebody who seems to be very selfish. And I think that progression from selfishness to living for something and sacrificing for people or something bigger than yourself is very much a part of Star Wars, but the hero's journey and everything that George learned from Joseph Campbell as well. We're a communal species. We're a cooperative species. And we are rewarded in the throe of history for when we act in that way, when we think about things that are more important than just our own individual needs. And so Paper Moon is such a wonderful film because you think it's all about transporting this character, to their living relative after their mother passes away. And then we figure out it's a bit ambiguous, but it's suggested that maybe she was actually his daughter. What's interesting, because the actors are actually father and daughter. But the idea that when she finally gets delivered to where she belongs, you realize, no, that journey was what reinforced it. And that bond was what was important for both of them. And so the unexpected twist of her leaving behind this cushy life that she could have had and going and being a con artist with Ryan O'Neal, I find it unexpected and fulfilling and really satisfying ending. And it's just a beautiful movie. And so, as you point out, we do find influences in cinema stylistically, but also story-wise, because great stories have been told before, and Star Wars is a wonderful way to encapsulate a lot of what came before and serve it up to a new generation in a slightly different context.
Great, thank you. Next up, we'll have Dan from Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, gentlemen. This is a question I ask my mythology students, and I'm excited to see what the two of you think about this. I want to see if you can talk about the symbolism of Din Djarin initially struggling with wielding the dark saber in the Book of Boba Fett.
That's a great question. I'm glad you caught that, because on the one hand, you're super excited because as the first person who ever wielded the dark saber.
Oh boy, here we go.
As Pre Vizsla, I could say that it was that George, that was a reshoot, by the way, because I was originally, that's a public record, right? It was originally when I recorded the voice, it was a vibroblade. Mm-hmm. And when George had seen it cut together, I found out from Dave, because I got called back into the recording booth, that no, the vibroblade can't block another lightsaber. It has to be, and he created this lore around the dark saber that was stolen from a Jedi temple, and the idea of Tar Vizsla, somebody who was a Jedi and a Mandalorian, and I remember, I got to go back and record this. I told my wife what I was doing. I got to go back and I got to do it again. She was like, George is right. That's super cool. Super cool. And she was right. It ended up being this compelling image of what this thing is. But then also I got my clues from Rebels where, when Sabine was learning to wield it, it was heavy to her. Mm-hmm. And the sense that there is, it's almost like the teachings in martial arts of like, you can't grab water. You have to cup your hands, and it's not something you could control. You have to flow with it. And the Mandalorian, somebody who probably doesn't have a lot of force abilities and doesn't have any training in it, and who's great at every other weapon, this thing is heavy. And you notice when Paz Vizsla picks up the Darksaber to use it, it ends up being the thing that probably loses the battle for him in the Book of Boba Fett, that he's even stronger, but it's even heavier to him. And so that whole Excalibur, sword in the stone, if you're fated to do this. So there's something larger that's allowing you to wield these things, and they become mythic or symbolic metaphors for whether this is your destiny, and if you're trying to force something. So, the strongest knights in the land could not budge the sword and pull it from the stone. And you want to fill in the rest of that?
No, it's all very good. Yeah, I mean, you did wield the sword, so you do now. But yeah, I think it's a matter of, when you're wielding a weapon like that, it is a lot of what's in your mind and in your heart more than your physical prowess. And I think that is what Kanan was trying to teach Sabine. She's fantastic she's a great warrior, but she's not balanced in her mind. All of her struggles with her family are preventing her from growing, are preventing her from being balanced in her body. And so, with Mando, he comes into this thing the right way because he doesn't really even want it. But that lack of wanting it is almost like a lack of responsibility. It's saying that, well, why don't you value it? And how can you wield it if you don't really even value it? So it's always a good metaphor.
Well, it's also cool when he hurts it, he's using it, he's like limping around like this thing. Imagine, because I always thought about that, like a lightsaber, if you don't know how to use it,
it's a fumble.
It's got to be a bigger, that's not, it's not a good, it always amazed me that they weren't hurting themselves more with
I think a lot of people did. You just didn't hear about them because you hurt yourself. You're not in the story anymore.
Right.
You fall out of it.
But they're all having.
I was always shocked when Han used Luke's lightsaber to cut open the tauntaun. I thought that was a big move. But he's smart, but all he does is make a little
that's
split.
It. One quick thing,
Not a big deal.
No, he's not fighting.
He doesn't want to use that thing. It's like, here's the other thing about a lightsaber. By any definition of the world they live in, it's a really old weapon.
Right.
So I've talked about this.
It's not as cool to them, you were saying.
No, it's not. Like a samurai is an incredibly well-trained warrior, and that seems great, and they're highly effective, and they're very smart, and they have a way of being. And then rifles come around. And when you see the Seven Samurai, you see how difficult it is for these incredibly skilled warriors with with a philosophy and a way of life, but they just get thoughtlessly taken out by someone with a rifle. And so, it's up to Kyuzo to go in and take out as many as he can. And it's dangerous because technology is overcoming what skill and discipline is given them. And that becomes a quick and easy path to power, right? Is now we have a weapon, a blaster that can just, take down a Jedi. So now we have more people with more blasters. And that's it is an old, elegant thing to wield a lightsaber. And it takes a tremendous amount of training and discipline to wield it. You just can't pick it up and use it. So all of that then fits in with George's philosophy about the Force itself, which is, yes, we are all part of the Force. We are all connected. We all have it. But it takes a great deal of training and discipline to understand how to wield it. And very few people have that discipline. In our own world, we see that. It's so hard to be disciplined to do things that are good for us, physically, mind, body, spirit. So it's true in the Star Wars universe as well.
Great. All right. This is Sarah with Fangirls Going Rogue. It is so amazing to talk with you.
Hey.
And I loved when Din took off his helmet for the first time in the Believer episode, which you directed. Mm-hmm. And this new season is going to follow Din's journey because of the repercussions of those moments. So I'd love for you to talk about why removing that helmet is so crucial to Din's journey in The Mandalorian.
I think, Din Djarin as a character was introduced to us as the Mandalorian. We didn't even know his name. We didn't have any idea about who he was or his background, but we knew, and he had this creed and this belief system that was built around being Mandalorian, and the helmet and the removal of the helmet was so instrumental and to that creed. And so I think just in terms of, who he is as a character because of this bounty, from the moment he got this bounty and it was revealed what it was, it's completely wired his ideas about all of it, both his identity as a bounty hunter, but then he has his identity as a Mandalorian. And so when we were coming to that episode, knowing that with that there would have to come a time when those beliefs came up against reality, came up against sort of what he needed to do, particularly to protect this child, and what would he do in that circumstance if he had to take off this helmet. So I think he made that choice. I think he made the right choice. But obviously, even sometimes when we make the right choices, it has repercussions that reverberate beyond. So I think in this case, and as we begin the season, that's exactly where we are. And even though he has this child now in his care in a more permanent way, those decisions for those who brought him in, that covert who took him in, are still going to have lasting consequences, which Din Djarin has to now find a way to atone for.
Thank you.
Charlotte and Caitlin, you're up next.
Hi, Rick. I'm Caitlin from Skytalkers. It's so nice to talk to you today.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Our question is, your episode of The Mandalorian have been some of our favorites in the past. What themes or concepts are you most excited to explore when you take on a new episode?
Yeah, I'm always trying to find a bit of complication, in the episodes that I do, or something that feels like I can explore a larger thematic idea, even though it's within the context of this world that's very very different than the one we live in. And so what I liked about my second episode was this bounty hunter was faced with the decision he made then to not, or that he's going to now have to face this child and what this child means as he now has to deliver it to wherever he needs to deliver it to, and how that changes his ideas of the world. And then that obviously culminates in when he takes off his helmet for this kid, for the same reason. But that episode was very much starting to plant the seeds of, well, what are our beliefs? What do we really stand for? And if we only stand for them when they're convenient, then are they really truly our beliefs? And he got challenged in some ways by the unlikeliest character in Mayfeld, Bill Burr, in that episode. And so, I think this season becomes sort of a continuation of that conversation, now that we see not only, is he as a Mandalorian has a certain set of beliefs, but we know that there are other Mandalorians like Bo-Katan and her crew that have a different sort of idea of what that is. So how those come together and what that means when those ideas that are so very different have to then, sort of intermingle. I think that sort of complication has always been really fascinating for me, and this season certainly has a lot of that we will expand on, and so that I think is really the kind of stuff that I like to really get involved in as a director and a filmmaker.
Richard and Sarah, you have the next question.
Hey there, I am Richard from Skywalking Through Neverland, and it's so great to speak with you.
Hey, good to talk to you too.
For the episode that you directed for season 3, was there a particular musical direction you gave Joseph Shirley that you can tease us with?
Well, I mean, I think what's first of all, I think Joe's work on this has been phenomenal, and obviously, he's worked with Ludwig and been a part of that, and sort of continues on those themes that were built, but also just because of the the size and scope and scale of this season. And I think they've all been big in their own right, but this certainly has a very cinematic feel to it. So I think what Joe has done throughout the season is build upon that, and some of those themes feel very much like the ones that we know and love and are familiar with, because it's just the scale of the show now sort of warranted something like that. So I do feel like we're feeling some of the opera and this season around as Joe starts to tackle the music. So,
well, thank you very much, and you have spoken.
I have.
Kerwin and Keith, you have the next question.
Thank you. We're Kerwin and Keith from Father Son Galaxy. How are you, Rick?
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
you guys?
I
Nice
just
to
want
meet
to say that I've been a big fan of your work from the very beginning. I enjoy The Wood and Brown Sugar. They're wonderful films.
Oh my good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Your episodes in The Mandalorian have been praised for their ability to capture the spirit and the essence of the Star Wars universe. What do you think are some of the key elements of your episodes that make them resonate so strongly with the audience? And how do you balance the expectations of diehard fans with the need to appeal to a wider audience?
Oh wow, quite a question. I don't know. I don't know if I have a specific answer, because I think for me, I'm not necessarily, when I approach it, I don't approach it like it's Star Wars. Because I think what I loved about this world and what was so special is that it felt very real and grounded, and these characters were real to me, and the things they were dealing with in terms of family, in terms of just sort of adventure, in terms of just the call to wanted to make change, all felt so real to me. So and so that was all put into this world that was one conceived by George, that had all this technology and all these different alien species, and it had the Force and it had Jedi, but ultimately the stories were about these people. And so my approach has always been that I'm trying to find the story that resonates with me as a human being, and then hopefully all the things that make Star Wars what it is, enhances that. And so that's always been my approach, is to just say, let me just tell this story, and then hopefully it resonates. And then I think for me, being a fan of the original and just what George Lucas was able to create, I've always just tried to be true to that. And George sort of created this story that was about this particular galaxy, but he was living in a world that was very real, and those themes and ideas were coming through in the work he was doing. And so I think in the same way, that's what I'm trying to do as I approach each episode, or the work that I'm doing, is it sort of relates to me in a way that's very real. And I think that's what makes Star Wars, is at the end of the day, it's still real people, even though it's in a galaxy far away. So that's always been my approach.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian, you have the next question.
Hi, I'm Brian with the Full of Sith podcast.
All right.
Rick, thanks for talking to us. I read in an interview that you did that the different directors always bring something of their own to the table for each episode of the show. And one of the things I've always really been fascinated by are like those cinematic influences. When we talked to Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni earlier today, they talked about like Paper Moon and Seven Samurai. And I know you kind of come from a different world of filmmaking, maybe sometimes than they might. What stuff are you falling back on? What influences or inspires you as you're sitting down to work on your episodes in season 3?
I mean, I think, look, a lot of those influences are universal, and they were the same things that influenced me as a filmmaker. and certainly, as George was creating Star Wars, influenced him. But so I don't necessarily like, and I don't always look at specific films or genres as a touch point. But there were a couple of things, especially in past seasons, that I really sort of looked at as I was thinking about my episodes. In season 1, episode 2, the child, I was really thinking about The Kid, the Charlie Chaplin film, because in many ways, I was telling this story with very little dialogue. I don't think, I think the first half of the film or first half of the episode, there's not one word of dialogue spoken. And so how do you tell this story about this relationship when you don't have words to help you? And so I went back and looked at a lot of those films, particularly that one. And so that became an influence. And then as I was thinking about, writing again my episode season 2, I was thinking a lot about Wages of Fear, this film that I'd seen about these men who transport nitroglycerin. And so there was something about how, because they were in these life or death circumstances, these people who often were from different points of view in those moments were sort of free of fear, so they could kind of reveal themselves to each other. And so I think for Mando and Mayfeld being on a similar kind of adventure, I felt could be an interesting way to sort of challenge Mando's ideas from someone who probably wouldn't be able to challenge him otherwise. And so for this season, there's not necessarily one film or thought that I have in mind, but I do think about these themes about what defines us, what is our ideology, how does that define us individually, but then what does it mean to be a part of a larger group? And some of those ideas are going to be revisited here this season. And I'm really excited about those bigger picture ideas around the Mandalorians as we get into season 3 that have been seeded, but now are really going to come to real fruition. But I don't necessarily have a specific movie in mind, but I think that's really where this season is.
Dan, you're up next.
Hey, Dan Zare from Coffee with Kenobi. One of my favorite things about the behind the scenes of the first season, besides you wearing the J's, of course, best dressed director in Star Wars. There you go. I liked hearing about your the production and you all sitting together in that roundtable. If you could talk about your role in the production of the show and how it's evolved this season, and how does that impact your role as a director?
Yeah, what's been incredible about this experience is, of course, my Star Wars fandom and geekdom has been, thoroughly expressed, but really the environment that was created by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni as this show was coming together really set the tone for the experience of making this story, and it was so collaborative and so open, and he was so open to each director bringing their point of view to the larger storytelling, that it really created a sort of a family dynamic in terms of how these stories come together. And it didn't feel like you're sort of passing a story from one person to another, but everyone was sort of telling the same story and sort of understood it. And there was a unique way that first season came together, because we were all sort of new to the technology and sort of had to really know what everyone else was doing. That informed the process moving forward. So because it's always been that, and Jon has sort of been the one who has done most of the writing, if not all of it, it doesn't have the feel of like, what I guess would be traditional television. So it's always felt very collaborative in that way. So as my role expanded, specifically because I was also writing, and after the first episode I directed, Jon asked me to do another episode and also write on it. I've had the opportunity to to sort of be a part of his process and that process as he's been writing and thinking about the seasons as they're coming together. And that was the case in season 2. You know, he asked me to write an episode. And so that meant, you know, hearing and talking to him about his process and what he was bringing together, and talking to Dave and trying to make sure it all lined up as I was writing, because it wasn't like a traditional writer's room. So we all had to be aligned in what we were writing. So it helped me sort of see the overall arc of storytelling. So this season has been sort of a natural progression of that. And that now that I'm coming on both as a director, but also executive producer, being able to have been a part of that process since season 1, and now it's sort of expanded in a way that there's trust between the 3 of us, trust between myself and Jon. And as the show just got bigger and bigger, it's something that I think we all, having been a part of it from the beginning, needed to all get our arms around. So I sort of expanded my role in that way, but in some ways it still feels very familiar to what we've been doing since season 1.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, we're so excited to meet you and see you. And I'm Sarah from Fangirls Going Rogue. And hello. Now, you're known for playing 2 iconic characters in Bo-Katan and The Mandalorian, and also Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica. And they both kind of set their own rules. So is there something about this type of character that you're drawn to specifically?
Listen, I am such a rule follower in my own life. So it's very nice to live vicariously through these women. But no, I love complicated women. I find them to be the most relatable. You know, life isn't black and white, and I think that I find them to be the most interesting to sort of live in for a while, for sure.
Charlotte from Skytalkers.
Hi, Katee. I'm Caitlin from Skytalkers. It's so nice to talk to you today.
Hi.
In this season, how would you describe Din and Bo's relationship?
You know, he's a bit of a distraction and a nuisance to her. You know, I think that he inserted himself in a plan that she thought was going to go one way, and you know, it didn't really work out the way that she wanted it to. I think that Bo-Katan truly believes that the only way to rule her people is by possessing the Darksaber. And I think that if I were her, and you know, we've all seen her sitting on that throne stewing, I'd be figuring out how to get it back, you know. And I think that may it probably permeates most of her thinking at this point.
Richard?
Hey there, I am Richard from Skywalking Through Neverland. Great to talk with you, and you look fantastic today, by the way.
Thank you.
Speaking of looking fantastic, can you talk about Bo-Katan's armor? How the Mandalorians like to personalize their armor. Did you personalize Bo-Katan's armor in any way?
So you're right. Armor is incredibly personalized in the Mandalorians. And I think that's one of the things, as like just a fan of Star Wars and like a Katee on set, walking around and looking at all of the different armor this year was absolutely so much fun. You know, our costume department is just unmatched. They're so good at what they do. And you see how I'm avoiding the question that you asked me, right?
Yes, I've noticed that.
You know, we'll see.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Kerwin, go ahead.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So you portrayed the character Bo-Katan in both the animated and live action series.
How did you approach playing this character in these different formats, and what were some of the challenges and opportunities of bringing Bo-Katan to life in a live-action setting?
Such a good question. Okay, so voice acting for Bo-Katan is a completely different medium. When I'm in the voice recording booth, I can do whatever I want with my body. I'm not restricted. There is a level of freedom that comes from just focusing on what your voice is doing and not having to think about what your hands are doing at the same time. And so then once I started playing Bo-Katan in live action, all of a sudden I had to figure out how she moved, how she walked, how she carried herself. What did her hands do? And what I realized from watching the animation and then putting on her armor and having played the voice for so long, what I realized is that Bo is incredibly stoic and she is purposeful with her movements. When she moves and when she speaks, it's very intentional. And so I had to calm myself when I played her and make sure that I didn't move as much as I do in the booth. So when I put the helmet on and play Bo-Katan, it is the closest thing. I love it because all of a sudden my face can do whatever it wants to. And I don't have to worry about that I look like Katee, who's like excited that she's in Star Wars.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brian.
Hey, Brian with Full of Sith. I want to ask, you've talked a lot, even just in this interview, about being a big Star Wars fan, and I kind of wanted to go back and see if you could walk us through the experience in season 2 of getting to like be on set with Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker.
I wish I was on set with Mark Hamill. So Dave Filoni, as good of friends as we are, and as much as I trust him, and as much as I say that he is the kindest, most sincere, most authentic, most amazing man in the entire world, lied to my face and told me it was Plo Koon. And I believed him because it was just an actor with dots on his face. And I believed him. I was like, Dave Filoni would never lie to me. Come on, we've been friends for over 10 years now. I trust this man with like everything, especially Star Wars. Lied to my face. So I was thinking it was Plo Koon until I literally saw the episode with you all, and I saw the green lightsaber, and I saw the cloak, and I went, stop it. Stop it. And I saw the X-Wing. I saw all of the things that you guys saw and was like, and texting Dave all at the same time. And all I text him was, Plo Koon? Question, exclamation, question, exclamation, question, exclamation, and then an angry face. He lied to me.
Dan.
Oh, that was really fun to listen to. Hi, I'm Dan Zare from Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello.
Hello there. So, speaking of Dave Filoni, what have you learned about as an actor and a storyteller from spending time with both Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau throughout this whole process?
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about commitment to your work with Dave. I mean, he literally lives this. He knows this world better than anybody, probably better than George at this point. You know, and it's what he does with an absolute passion that drives him. And I love talking to him about it all the time. It's just a joy. And you know, from Jon, I mean, Jon is a master. I've wanted to work with Jon since I got into this business. He was like on my list of people I wanted to work with. He's just such a good storyteller, and he really has the ability to lead you on a journey and see the big picture, but focus on the small details. And he's just so good at what he does.
Sarah?
Thank you. Do you think that Bo-Katan's sister Satine's life choices and her tragic death really weigh on Bo-Katan and maybe inform your performance in any way?
Absolutely. You know, I think that when one of the things that I think people don't realize is how young she was in Clone Wars, because we never really talked about it. And she was young and she was impressionable, and she believed, because she was literally raised to be the warrior in the family. Her sister was in government. She was the warrior. That was her place. And to take that away from the Mandalorian people, she did what she thought was right, and she aligned herself with people that she trusted. And by the time she realized the error of her ways, it was too late, and it cost her sister her life. I think that affects everything that she does. Every move she makes, everything she's doing now is to try and make up for that one moment.
Caitlin?
Hi, so excited to see you in season 3. I'm so excited. I really. Do you see Bo-Katan as a character who is after redemption?
I think that Bo has too big of an ego to realize that should be what she's doing. Maybe the having lost everything, and where we find her in the beginning of the season could put her on that journey potentially.
Richard and Sarah?
Hey there, good to speak with you again. It's only been a couple of minutes. But you've been to so many conventions, meeting so many fans. What memories do you have of meeting someone who either brought a tear to your eye or made you laugh really hard?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I've been doing this for a long time now. And one of the things that I always found to be incredibly important is going to conventions. It is part of the sci-fi world. It is part of the fan base. And I think that to deny that is a disservice to the genre. And I love going and talking to the fans and listening to what they liked about the thing that I did, or talking about some other project that we both think is really fun. It's something that's really important to me. And there's been moments that I've laughed hysterically. I was just at a convention and I told the story of basically how I, peed on myself in costume. It was fantastic. My suit is a one piece and I have to go to the restroom like normal person. And we couldn't get the whole thing off fast enough. And so they created a zipper for me to try out, and it didn't work. So we scrapped that idea and then just got more proficient at taking the suit off. So I try to make conventions fun, and I try to give away little tidbits of, information that people won't get anywhere else, because it's, hysterical.
Well, thank you very much. And you aren't the only actress who's peed on herself while in a Star Wars film or TV show.
Listen, when you are in all of this stuff, you're lucky if that's all you do.
Erwin and Keith?
Hello, Katee.
Hi.
Hello again.
Hi.
Bo-Katan. Hi. Bo-Katan is a character with a rich and complex backstory. What drew you to this character, and how did you prepare for the role?
So originally when I got offered the role of Bo, it was a very, very quick conversation with Dave and sort of my team. And it was just like, do you want to play a female Mandalorian warrior in an animated series? And I was like, of course I do. And jumped at the opportunity. I really didn't give it a second thought, because I was brought up on Star Wars. To be in Star Wars was like the pinnacle thing, that you go after. And so it was almost working backwards, in the sense that, once I had the opportunity to play her in live action, that's when that work started coming in. And I started questioning all the things that she'd been through and what that looked like. And I started doing the work of an on-screen actor, which is different than, in my opinion, than the work of a voice actor. You learn the story just as well, but at the end of the day, it's my voice conveying someone else's words and story. It was what Dave wanted it to sound like. And then once we went into animation and I took a little bit more ownership over the character, I started really working and trying to understand who she was and where she came from and the decisions that she'd made in her life that sort of put her on the trajectory of where we found her in Mandalorian.
Brian?
I imagine it hits you differently as a Star Wars fan, seeing your voice come out of an animated character, like that I'm in Star Wars giddiness versus seeing yourself in person in Star Wars. Like which did hit harder for you, or what was that experience like, processing the fact that you got to be in Star Wars?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the idea of playing a Star Wars character in any medium was not lost on me from the very beginning. I mean, I took the role because I never dreamed that Bo would be in live action. But seeing yourself in Star Wars next to a Jedi, like it's just crazy. I mean, like the little girl in me who watched, the original trilogy with my dad when I was like 6 years old, like would have just died. You know what I mean? Like she would have just, it's just such a cool thing. And I don't, I'd be hard pressed for anything to compare.
Dan?
So you talked a little bit earlier about your differences between yourself as a person and then, of course, Bo-Katan and then Starbuck. But I also am a huge Battlestar Galactica fan, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you some key similarities and differences for you between Bo-Katan, Starbuck, and also I loved you as Sarah Corvus in The Bionic Woman, too.
Oh, thank you. I loved that show. Too short-lived. Yeah. There is a youthful angst to Starbuck that is exhausting. She is really trying to figure out who she is and where she fits in the world and what her purpose is, and she's fighting back against authority and probably a little like Bo-Katan when we first meet her in Clone Wars. But I think that because of the tragic ending of Starbuck, we never got to see her grow into a woman, really, and I think that Bo has all of these life experiences and all of these tragedies and all of these burdens and the weight of the self-imposed desire to lead. I think all of that has created this character that is incredibly complicated and heavy and tragic, and then Sarah Corvus was just nuts. Sarah was just nuts. She was just crazy. And that was fun. Like I loved playing her. I absolutely loved playing her. That was my first sort of like foray into superhero status a little bit, in the sense that she had superhuman strength, which was really fun to play.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.